I'm Soledad O'Brien. Welcome to Matter of Fact. From Florence to Michael, it has already been a deadly and destructive hurricane season, and it's expected to worsen each year. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration projects a 300% increase in destructive Atlantic hurricanes by the end of the 21st century. They can link this increase to human-caused global warming. The U.S. government has been studying the effects of climate change since the 1960s, and it was President Nixon, a Republican, who pushed for an extensive green agenda, which included the establishment of NOAA and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Fast forward to today, and a recent Pew Research survey found that just 18% of conservative Republicans say global warming is caused by human activity, compared with 83% of liberal Democrats. Katharine Hayhoe is an atmospheric scientist and a professor at Texas Tech University. She's been listed as one of Time magazine's most influential people and has been called the best communicator on climate change. She's also an evangelical Christian. I spoke with her via Skype from Lubbock, Texas. Dr. Hayhoe, it's so nice to have you with us. We appreciate it. You get a lot of kudos for being a communicator. You're obviously a scientist as well. Is the issue, do you think, around global warming the communication versus the science?
I think it is, because we've known since the 1800s that digging up and burning coal and gas and oil was wrapping an extra blanket around the planet, causing it to warm. It's serious, but the biggest problem we have is that most people in the United States, even people who agree with the science, don't think that it matters to them personally.
If you looked at that UN report, which I know you did, which described floods and food shortages and wildfires, it was pretty terrifying. And I'm not sure it pushed people to actually make changes on the issue. Why do you think that is?
A couple of reasons. First of all, climate change is a slow-moving train wreck. We're really good at responding to the hurricane that's battering down our door today, but we are terrible at thinking long-term, preparing for what's going to happen in 10, 20, or 30 years. The second reason is that the report didn't offer us practical solutions because that isn't the domain of scientists. That's why when people ask me what's the most important thing that we as individuals can do, my answer is talk about it. Because less than 25% of people in the U.S. hear someone else talk about climate change more than once or twice a year. So if we don't care about it, why would we vote about it? Why would we want action about it?
You're an evangelical Christian. When you look at the numbers of people and how they feel about global warming and climate change, it's the white evangelical Christians who are the non-believers, if you will. I think the numbers are in the 30% of people who believe in the science of climate change. Why is that?
Well, the answer is actually partly in your question. I tell people I don't believe in global warming because it's often presented as an alternative religion. And when people already have a faith that they're very content with, nobody wants a different earth-worshiping religion. I look at the data and the facts using the brain that God gave me, and from those data and those facts from God's creation, it is clear that climate is changing, and for the first time in the history of this planet, humans really are responsible.
But there are evangelical Christians and others who would say they don't believe in the science, that when scientists talk about it, even credible scientists, that they just don't believe that it's happening in front of them. And how do you break through that, what is a non-belief?
What I've found through thousands of conversations is that even though people throw up sciencey sounding objections when you first raise the issue of climate change, it's just a natural cycle. CO2 is plant food. Climate has always been changing. You scientists fake the data.
Global warming, it's snowing today. How could there be global warming? That's a big one.
It is. It's a classic one. And in fact, I was in Boulder, Colorado yesterday, and we were there to talk about climate change with 200 other atmospheric scientists, and it was snowing. So what I've discovered, though, is that those sciencey sounding arguments are primarily a smokescreen for the real issue. And if you continue talking with someone past the initial exchange, very quickly, they will say something like, I don't want the government controlling my thermostat or telling me what kind of car I can or can't drive. Let's talk about solutions that are consistent with and compatible with your values. And those who reject the science of climate change, those people are primarily white males. No matter who we are, we're humans living on planet Earth, and this is the only home we have. It just makes sense to make sure that it's still able to give us everything we need to succeed.
Dr. Hayhoe, I see why you win rave reviews about your communication about climate science. Thank you so much for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.